Hello, it's Dr. Shantae, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. We are in the midst of a series, Unlearning Survival. So, we're talking about survival lies. We have 3 episodes in the series so far, and this is episode number 4. And the lie that we are unpacking today is I can't trust my gut. I can't trust my intuition. If you have ever felt like, you know what, looking at my past track record, I have not made good decisions in love, in choice of career, in friendships. And so maybe I'm just not the most trustworthy voice to be listening to. That's not actually true. That is something that we learn through traumatic experiences. And today we're going to be talking about how we get disconnected from our inner voice and how we can dial back in. Keep watching. So, if you grew up in environments where your needs and concerns were dismissed or minimized or trivialized, or you just were flat out being gaslit, you were told things like, stop being so sensitive, or why are you being such a baby, or that's not even a big deal, or just flat out denial like, that didn't happen. What are you talking about? I'm sure that didn't happen because I have had clients, friends, people that have said, I told my mom that this happened, or I told my dad that this happened, and they just brushed it under the rug, or they acted like it didn't happen, or they did not address my concerns in any meaningful way. And when that happens, when people in authority, people who are supposed to take care of you, people who are supposed to look out for you and protect you, say, that's not a big deal, or that didn't happen, then you start to doubt yourself. And you start thinking, okay, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I am blowing it out of proportion. Maybe this is normal. And that self doubt replaces self trust. And so your nervous system starts to override the inclination that something is wrong, the warning signs, to ignore the signals that are like, hey, this is dangerous, for the sake of being loyal or polite or keeping the peace. And so instead of trusting your gut and your nervous system, you learn to quiet it, to dial it down. And that's because your concerns were minimized, trivialized, or completely dismissed or denied altogether. Why is this a big deal? Why does this matter? Because when you don't have access to your intuition, then you stay in unsafe situations longer than you should. You stay in toxic relationships longer than you should. You stay in jobs and friendships and relationships longer than you should. And you start second guessing yourself, and you start ignoring your discomfort, and you ignore the red flags, and you start outsourcing your choices. And you think, well, I guess they know better than me, or yeah, I don't even want to deal with that. So I'm just going to I'm going to leave it to them. I'm going to let them decide. And this is so unhealthy because your body knows. Your body always knows. You just weren't allowed to listen to it. And so when you think about like animals in the wild, their instincts, when you see them minding their own business and then all of a sudden they perk up and they start looking around like something is amiss, like something is going on. They don't ignore that. They don't ignore that discomfort. They don't let somebody tell them, you know what, I'm sure it was just the wind. No, they start making decisions to pivot to safety, and you should too. So the good news is that your intuition is not broken. Your inner voice is still very much there. It was just buried under survival, because when you are in a household where you don't have agency, you got to go along to get along. You just got to suck it up, soldier on, make it work, and do what you got to do in order to survive that situation. But on this side of the fence, on this side of adulthood, you do have agency, and you have the ability to unlearn that lie. And part of unlearning that lie starts with self forgiveness. So go ahead and give yourself some grace for the decisions that you have made. Go ahead and give yourself some grace for all the times that you left it into somebody else's hands. Go ahead and give yourself some grace for that poor relationship that you were in far longer than you should have been. Don't beat yourself up, because that only compounds the suffering. And even though we can't avoid pain, we can absolutely manage suffering. And so don't compound your suffering by beating yourself up about choices that you've already made. Give yourself some grace, make some peace with that. But one of the ways that you start rebuilding that trust with your own voice is number one, listen to your body signals. So, you know how you hear people say things like, something told me to go back and check the garage, or something told me to call my child's school. That's something, that's your intuition, your inner voice talking. And trust that something. Start making small decisions, start learning to trust that voice and gradually build from there. But in addition to paying attention to what your body is telling you or what your spidey senses are telling you, you also have to learn how to get comfortable with discomfort. Because when you are burying your intuition and you are outsourcing your choices to other people and just letting them make the decisions, well, when you stop doing that, somebody's going to be upset about that. Somebody's going to notice that. Somebody's going to be like, oh, this what we doing now? Yeah, this what we doing now. Okay. And you let them deal with their feelings about that. But always keep in mind, it's not your job to manage somebody else's discomfort. If you are in situations that make you uncomfortable, you have the right to leave. If you are in situations that make you uncomfortable, you have the right to plan your exit. And I understand there are some situations, especially I have to say this. I have to say this while this Diddy case is going on right now with Cassie, because so many people are like, well, why didn't she just leave? And why didn't she just leave? I think we need to be asking a different question. Why did he abuse her? Not about what she didn't do, but what about what he did? It's a really insensitive question. And that question deserves a different frame, which is why didn't this person not abuse her? That's the better question. So instead of asking why didn't this person just flee the abuse, the better question is why is this person being abused? But having said that, and having worked with domestic violence victims for the early part of my career, I can tell you, leaving is not the easiest thing to do, because when people have threatened your life, when people have been physically abusive to you, sometimes leaving is the escalation that leads to death. It happens all the time. And so there's a difference between having choices and feeling like you have choices. And sometimes when you are in the throes of abuse and when you have been psychologically manipulated and gaslit and all the things, it's not easy to see what your clear path out is. And so I would just kindly ask that we stop asking that question and instead consider the abuser, and instead place the onus on the person that's doing the abusing rather than the person who is being abused. So before I let you go, I have a couple of questions that I want to ask you just to self-reflect, just to kind of get yourself thinking about and being introspective about how you lost connection with your inner voice. First question is, when did you start to doubt your instincts? At what point did you stop trusting yourself? When did you start to doubt your instincts? I think it's worth spending some time reflecting on how that happened. What were the series of events that led to that? And you might have to pull that thread all the way back to childhood. It might be one of those things where it started with my mother, it started with my father, it started with a sibling, it started in school, it started at church. Like, where did you start to silence your voice and shrink back and just say, that's okay. Never mind. What I have to say is not important. When did that start? And then the second question that I have is, where in your life are you still overriding your inner voice? Where in your life are you still people pleasing and saying, you know what? I'm just not going to make a stink. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to go along to get along. Where in your life are you still doing that? And this isn't to indict you. This is just awareness, okay? Because once it kind of comes to your conscious mind, because sometimes we don't even realize we're doing it because we've been doing it for so long. But once it comes to our conscious mind has to deal with it. Our conscious mind has to reconcile it, because we don't have any peace until we do. And so just raising the awareness over time, your brain starts to ferret out, okay, this is what we've been doing. This is the results that we've gotten. We don't like this. Here's how we're going to change this. So those are the two questions that I want you to consider in this episode. So that is where I will leave you for this episode. Self-trust is not something that you have lost. Lost means it cannot be found. It can be found. It is something that can be reclaimed. And now is your time to reclaim it, to tune back into your voice, and to trust your voice above all others. Because intuitively, you do know what is best for you. And whether you consider that a divine connection or the universe speaking to you, I think there is some comfort in the thought that there is I think that there is some comfort in the thought that all we can see is what we can see. All we know is what we know, that we have a very limited perspective and a limited scope of view. But whether you believe in God or the universe, that is a much higher view. That is a much higher vantage point. And if something or someone from that vantage point is speaking directly to your heart, you can trust in that. So that is where I will leave it. And in our next episode in this mini series is probably one of my favorites. We are going to be unpacking the lie that joy can wait. Oh my goodness. So many people have put happiness on hold because they say, well, when I lose that 20 pounds, or when I get the kids off to college, or when I retire, and they are living in the when and thens. They keep deferring their happiness. And this is another one of those lies that we learn in trauma. And we are going to unpack it like we've unpacked all the rest. So if you found value in this episode, I encourage you to like, share, subscribe. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you guys in part 5.